Good day, everyone. Welcome. My name is Loreto Atamosa, your instructor for UM 2 with the description Philosophy. For today's video, we will talk about personal identity and personhood. For today's video discussion, everyone is expected to comprehend what personal identity means in a philosophical standpoint and to scrutinize the difference between personal identity and personhood. Again, welcome to another interesting topic. This video discussion is about identity and personhood. It will also talk what satisfies one's identity and the difference between personhood and being human. Just a bit of a reminder, questions about personal identity is a very simple query, but it is hard to define. This is why many philosophers over time grapples into such issues. And to start with our video discussion, here is a presentation made by Crash Course Philosophy about personal identity. Here, let's watch this.
Crash Course Philosophy is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace, share your passion with the world.
Who is the doctor? Is it this guy or this one? How about him? As any good Whovian knows, the answer is yes, all of them. But also, wait. No. In the show Doctor Who, each incarnation of the Doctor has a completely different body, different mannerisms, likes and dislikes, and to some extent, memories. So, how are they all the Doctor? Science fiction is great at giving us scenarios to grapple with that seem far out and only barely possible. But when you think about it, the issue of who is who isn't really that much more clear-cut in real life. The fact is, you can take the same questions I asked about the Doctor and ask them about anyone. Like me. I mean, are these people any more similar to each other than these people? Last time we talked about identity, or basically what makes an object the same over time. And the concept can get more complex when we talk about our own identity, or the identity of others. When talking about ships or trees, we might be willing to say, yeah, okay, that's just not the same thing it used to be. But when we're talking about, say, me, I have the strong belief that I am the same person that Mom and Dad brought home from the hospital back in 1980. I'm the same kid that cut his hand open on that broken flower pot. I have the scar to prove it. And there's some guy in the future who's still gonna be me, even though he'll be all stooped over and wrinkled and gray. At least I hope. And you probably think of yourself in the same way, that you'll keep being the same person from birth to death. But you could argue, and some have, that the only thing that really remains constant about you your whole life is your name. And for some of us, even that changes. Philosophers have struggled with the issue of personal identity for a long time, trying to find that special something, that essential property that makes you you, the thing that preserves your identity through time and through all the changes that come with it. Let's take a look at some of the ideas they've come up with. First, there's the body theory. This is the sort of default position that most people have, and the assumption that Doctor Who messes with so badly. It says that personal identity persists over time because you remain in the same body from birth to death. And now, in a sense, that's true. I don't know anybody outside of like Freaky Friday that's had a body transplant, but it's not like you consist of all of the same identical stuff that you had when you were born. You've sloughed off and replaced your outer layer of skin, for example, hundreds of times so far. Your red blood cells only live for about 4 months before they're cycled out. Even your skeleton is constantly being remodeled. So kind of like the Doctor or the ship of Theseus, you're constantly being replaced by new physical versions of yourself. And if you are your body, then how much of you can change until you become a new you? Can you get a haircut? What if you lose or gain a lot of weight, or grow a beard, or put John Travolta's face on your face? Let's go over to the thought bubble and explore the ideas of our bodies and ourselves with some flash philosophy. 20th century English moral philosopher Bernard Williams proposed a thought experiment to make us consider where we think our personal identity resides. It goes something like this. You and I have been kidnapped by a mad scientist. He tells us that tomorrow morning he's going to transfer all of your mental content, all of your beliefs, memories, personality, everything into my brain. And then he's going to move all of my mental content into your brain. Presumably this is how he earned the title of mad scientist. But he also tells us that after the procedure is complete and your mental content is in this body and my mental content is in yours, he'll give one of the bodies $1 million and the other body will be tortured. And he's decided to let you pick which body gets the torture and which one gets the cash. What do you decide? Your answer answer should give you a clue about where you think your identity lies. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Now, our friend John Locke didn't cotton to the idea that the most essential aspect of a person is her body. For Locke, the thing that makes you you is the non-physical stuff, your consciousness. But Locke recognized that we don't maintain a single consciousness over the course of our entire lives. We go to sleep every day, but when we wake up, our conscious selves remember who we were the day before. So Locke posited a memory theory of personal identity. He believed that your identity persists over time because you retain memories of yourself at different points, and each of those memories is connected to one before it. Now, we don't remember every single moment. I mean, do you remember what you ate for lunch last Tuesday? But you can probably remember a time when you did remember that, like, say, last Tuesday afternoon. And if you can remember that version of yourself, then you're still connected to the Tuesday at lunch person through a chain of memory. And this process can take us a lot farther back than last Tuesday. Locke said that if you can remember back to your first day of kindergarten, you maintain a memory link to that person. Sure, your mom also remembers that day, but no one remembers it from the inside. The butterflies in your stomach, the way your new shoes felt stiff after a summer of running barefoot. That's your memory, and since it's yours, you must be the same person who experienced that memory. The memory theory actually makes a lot of sense, but it's got some problems of its own. First off, no one remembers being born. And that's not a bad thing, really. I mean, I imagine none of us would really want to recall that particular experience or the couple of years that we spent after that pooping in our pants. But if personal identity requires a memory, then none of us became who we are until our first memory, which means we all lost at least a couple of years at the beginning. What's more, if you're committed to this view, you have to accept that people stop being the same person if they lose their memories. So, say a person begins to suffer from dementia. Once he's lost the ability to remember his past, does he stop being that person? So the memory theory presents problems for both the beginnings and ends of life, but there's also the issue of false memories. Memory, after all, is notoriously tricky. We know that a group of eyewitnesses are likely to recount the same event very differently, so how do we know that the memories we have are accurate? And if they're not, if things didn't actually happen the way you remember, then how do those faulty memories influence your identity? Do they make you a partially fictional person? So at first, Locke's theory seems to have some advantages over the body theory because consciousness and memory persist through your body's physical changes. But after a little interrogation, you find that memory is pretty tenuous too. Now here's the $64,000 Altarian question. Does any of this really matter? Like, who cares if there's a you that persists from your birth to your death? Maybe all you feel like you need to know is that you have a self that has to go to work and pay bills, and that's plenty. But the matter of personal identity isn't just a conceptual puzzle, it's also deeply important when you're thinking about how you should live your life. For example, do you believe that you have obligations to particular people in your life? Well, if those people don't persist as distinct identities, then your obligations might not either. And the same goes for how people think about you. Your boss only has to give you the raise she promised you if each of you remains the same person you were when she made the promise. In fact, if next Friday you're not the same person anymore, she doesn't even have to pay you. The fact is, we've all built our lives and our society on the expectations that individuals will continue to be who they are unchanged, and those people expect the same thing out of you. So now you can see this really is your problem. You expect a paycheck, you expect people to keep their promises. But as we learned back with Clifford and James and epistemic responsibility, you don't just get to believe things without reason. So if you think you deserve that paycheck, you need to figure out why. Today we talked about personal identity. We considered the two main answers people give to the question of where your identity lies, in your body or in the connected memories of your consciousness. We found some pretty significant problems with each of them, and then we talked about why the persistence of identity is actually something you should care about. Next time, we will return to the issue to talk about whether you really need the idea of a you that persists over time. If you still exist then, I hope you join me. This episode of Crash Course Philosophy is made possible by Squarespace. Squarespace is a way to build a website, blog, or online store for you and your ideas. Squarespace features a user-friendly interface, custom templates, and 24/7 customer support. Try Squarespace at squarespace.com/crashcourse for a special offer. Squarespace. Share your passion with the world. Crash Course Philosophy is produced in association with PBS Digital Studios. You can head over to their channel and check out a playlist of the latest episodes of shows like Coma Nitty, Deep Look, and First Person. This episode of Crash Course was filmed in the Dr. Cheryl C. Kinney Crash Course studio with the help of all of these awesome people, and our equally fantastic graphics team is Thought Cafe.
Alrighty, that is amazing, right? So let us now discover some interesting idea about personal identity. So what is personal identity? Personal identity deals with philosophical questions that arise about ourselves by virtue of being people. This contrasts with questions about ourselves that arise by virtue of being living things, conscious beings, material objects, or the like. Many of these questions occur to nearly all of us now and again. What am I? When did I begin? What will happen to me when I die? So others are more abstruse. They have been discussed since the origins of Western philosophy, an essential property, or the elements that define something. According to John Locke on personal identity, John Locke speaks on personal identity and survival of consciousness after death. A criterion of personal identity through time is given. Such a criterion specifies, insofar as that is possible, the necessary and sufficient conditions for the survival of persons. John Locke holds that personal identity is a matter of psychological continuity. He considered personal identity, or the self, to be founded on consciousness, and not on the substance of either the soul or the body. So the concept of personhood is widely involved in biomedical ethics discussions about abortion, stem cell research, euthanasia, and etc. Though it is not always discussed explicitly, it also has other philosophical and legal relevance. Some thinkers use the term person in such a way that one is either a person or not, but the situation is not that simple. It will be useful to distinguish among different types, contexts, or meanings of personhoods: moral, metaphysical, physical, and legal. And on the other hand, let's discuss moral personhood. So the moral sense of personhood denotes individual beings who are moral agents. So moral agents engage in behavior that can be evaluated as moral or immoral, as a morally right or wrong, as a morally permissible or morally impermissible. Their acts are blameworthy or praiseworthy. It makes sense to hold them morally responsible for their intentional actions. So ordinarily, human beings are considered moral agents and moral persons. Non-human animals such as dogs, cats, birds, and fish are commonly held not to be moral agents and not moral persons. So a lion in the jungle killing another animal to eat, or killing a human for whatever reason, it is not held to be engaging in morally impermissible or blameworthy behavior. Pet owners often scold their pets for engaging in certain undesirable types of behavior, such as urinating on the carpet, digging in the garden, or failing to obey a command. But the scream of a bad dog is not usually considered to imply moral agency. One could argue, though, that there are some rudiments of moral expectations or anthropomorphism involved on the part of the owner. And so let's proceed with metaphysical personhood. Metaphysics can be characterized as the study of the nature of reality. In its most basic forms or categories, such as discussion of whether everything that exists is physical, or whether there are two ultimate kinds of irreducible stuff, mind and matter. Sometimes the term metaphysics is taken to refer to a transcendent realm beyond the physical, but modern secular philosophers commonly talk of personhood in a metaphysical sense without implying the existence of any such transcendent realm. So the concept of metaphysical personhood would be to use personhood as a basic category of reality encompassing being of a certain type, rational, moral agents, using language, and etc. So there is no consensus about the exact criteria. Adult human beings are commonly considered persons, and a very interesting question to ask yourself is that of exactly what it is about us that makes a person. Clearly not having a particular hair color, or even having hair, or being a particular height or weight, or having a brain, and etc. Here are some suggested or commonly suggested criteria: rationality or logical reasoning ability, consciousness, self-consciousness or self-awareness, use of language, ability to initiate action, moral agency and the ability to engage in moral judgments, and intelligence. So does having one or more of these criteria makes us a person? Do we have to have all of them? Can we have some minimal set? And lastly, does it have to be the same set for all persons? Now let us proceed with physical personhood. Physical personhood per se is a concept rarely discussed by ethicists because all the heavy lifting is usually done by the notion of metaphysical personhood. So as mentioned, materialist or physicalist believes that a human being is essentially a physical being with no metaphysical distinct soul or mind. On this view, physical personhood and metaphysical personhood are going to be pretty much the same thing. Now let us proceed with legal personhood. The law often recognizes that certain groups of individuals can be considered as a unit, an actor, a legal person. This sort of legal personhood allows the unitary group, for example, a corporation, to enter into contracts and engage in other legal matters as if it were a natural person. And so to most thinkers, useful as this is, it is an artificial type of person and not metaphysical significant. Corporate personhood may be a very useful legal concept without necessarily implying anything about corporations being metaphysical persons. And now let's proceed with persons and human beings. It is common to assume person and human being mean the same thing, but from what has been described with our previous discussion, this may not be true, and in fact, most philosophers distinguish between these two types of entity. Human being is a biological designation for those of the species Homo sapiens or related, and many thinkers hold that a person may or may not be a human being and a human being may or may not be a person. This may sound very odd to you at first, but please pay attention to how we are using these terms. Lastly, we have degrees of personhood. Along with the question of which criteria we consider necessarily for personhood and which we consider sufficient conditions of personhood, one might come to the conclusion that personhood might come in degrees. That is, there can be partial persons and one individual is more of a person than other. This might seem nonsensical, but consider the possibility of aliens from other planets that seem to be between chimpanzees and human beings. Are they persons or not? It might be hard to say, and we might allow they are partial persons. The same might occur if non-human animal species evolved to such an extent that we recognize them as having some kind of personhood. At what point did they gain it? Along the way, were they partial persons? Or consider the example of a severely brain-damaged individual, clearly still a human being, but possibly not fully a person in the metaphysical sense. Alrighty, that's the end of our video, and now you know what encompasses personal identity. My name is Loreto Atamosa. See you guys in my next video. Goodbye!